The sound of Sophie's laughter was unmistakable, even through the tiny speaker of my phone. I'd heard it 1,000 times at dinner parties, during movies, in quiet moments when she'd whisper promises about our future. But I'd never heard it like this. Cruel, dismissive, aimed directly at me. "He's so obsessed with me, it's pathetic," her voice echoed in our empty apartment. "After the honeymoon, I'm moving in with Ryan anyway. At least he actually gets me." I sat alone in our apartment the night before our wedding, listening to the voice of the woman I thought I knew. The words hit like physical blows, each one precise and devastating. 12 years together, 4 of them engaged. And this was how it ended, with me hunched over my phone at 2 a.m., listening to the woman I loved mocking me to her lover. But Sophie made one crucial mistake. She underestimated what a cybersecurity expert could do with the right motivation. Quick, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever discovered someone's true feelings through their private conversations. Now, if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted completely, smash that subscribe button because this story is about turning digital evidence into perfect revenge. Hit that like button if you think people who plan to humiliate others deserve to be exposed. Let's dive into this calculated takedown. My name is Marcus Chen, and until yesterday, I was just another cybersecurity specialist with a stable career at a tech consulting firm, a mortgage on a downtown condo, and a fiancé I would have done anything for. Sophie and I met during our second year of college. She was studying communications while I was buried in computer science courses. We were opposites in many ways. She was outgoing and sociable, while I preferred smaller gatherings and deeper conversations. But somehow, we balanced each other perfectly. I admired her ability to light up any room she entered, and she claimed to appreciate my steadiness, my reliability. She used to curl against me on the couch with contentment. "You're my anchor. Everyone else is so unpredictable, but you're always there." I took pride in that, in being dependable, in building something lasting with someone I loved completely. We moved in together after graduation, found jobs in the same city, and settled into what I thought was a perfect life. I advanced quickly at my company, eventually leading a team that developed security protocols for major corporations. Sophie bounced between communications firms, always chasing something bigger and better, always talking about her next career move. 4 years ago, I proposed. It wasn't flashy, just the two of us on a weekend trip to the mountains, the ring presented over breakfast on our cabin's porch. Sophie cried, said yes, and immediately began planning what she called the perfect wedding. Her eyes had lit up with almost manic energy. "It has to be special. I've waited my whole life for this moment." So we waited, saving money while she planned every detail. The venue is a historic chapel downtown. The flowers are white roses and lavender. The guest list, over 200 people. The budget was staggering but manageable with both our salaries and her parents' generous contribution. Her parents adored me, especially her father, David, who often joked about finally having a son-in-law who understood technology and could help him with his computer problems. My family was smaller, just my parents and my younger sister Lisa, who had always been protective of me and sometimes suspiciously wary of Sophie. Lisa would narrow her eyes whenever Sophie wasn't looking. "She's a little too perfect. Nobody's that put together all the time." I dismissed her concerns. Sophie was just ambitious, image-conscious. It wasn't a crime to want the best things in life. 6 months ago, Sophie started working with a personal trainer. She'd announced it with unusual enthusiasm. "Wedding prep. I want to look absolutely perfect for our big day." Ryan was his name, a former college athlete turned fitness coach at the expensive gym her father paid for. Sophie began spending more time there, coming home later, glowing with what she claimed was post-workout energy. I was happy for her, proud even of her dedication to being in the best shape for our wedding day. Once, she'd looked at me with what seemed like genuine concern. "You don't mind that I'm spending so much time at the gym, do you?" "Of course not," I replied without hesitation. "I want you to be happy." She smiled, but something in her eyes flickered. Her voice carried an odd tone when she responded. "You always say that." 2 weeks before the wedding, she grew distant. Checking her phone more often, stepping outside to take calls, always with reasonable explanations. I noticed but didn't pry. Wedding stress, I thought. Last-minute nerves. Nothing unusual. 1 week before the wedding, I caught her in a small lie. She said she was having dinner with her bridesmaids, but Lisa spotted her at a restaurant with a man I didn't recognize. When I mentioned it casually, Sophie dismissed it with practiced ease. Her voice was light, almost amused. Just a quick meeting with the wedding photographer to discuss final details. You worry too much. I believed her because that's what I always did. I believed in us, in what we'd built together. Until the email arrived the night before our wedding. The sender's address was a string of random numbers and letters. No subject line. 3 audio attachments labeled simply 1, 2, and 3. I almost deleted it as spam. Thank God I didn't. Recording 1 was Sophie and a man Ryan, I quickly realized, laughing about how I'd never suspected anything. Ryan's voice was smooth and confident, tinged with amusement. 4 months and he hasn't noticed a thing. Sophie replied with intimate satisfaction. That's Marcus for you. The man can spot security flaws that nobody else can see, but he's completely blind to everything happening right under his nose. Recording 2 was more devastating. Sophie was describing our relationship in humiliating detail, comparing me unfavorably to Ryan, both of them laughing at what she called my predictable nature. Her voice dripped with condescension. He actually thinks I'm happy. It's like living with a security manual, everything safe, everything boring, everything exactly the same every single day. Ryan's laughter joined hers, cruel and knowing. Recording 3 was the one that changed everything. Sophie outlined their plan with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. She spoke with chilling matter-of-factness. After the wedding, we'll go on the honeymoon 2 weeks in Hawaii on Daddy's credit card. I'll get some great social media content, maybe a few more wedding gifts to return for cash. Then I'll tell him I need space to figure things out. Her voice was so calculating, as if she were discussing a business transaction rather than destroying someone's life. Sophie continued with cold precision. The prenup only kicks in after 6 months of marriage. So I'll file for divorce before then. He'll be devastated, but he won't fight it. He never fights anything. A few tears, some where did we go wrong conversations, and he'll let me walk away with half of everything. Ryan's voice carried eager anticipation. And then? Sophie's response was delivered with smug confidence. Then you move in with me, obviously. Daddy will be upset at first, but he'll get over it. He always does. And by then, we'll have Marcus's money to start fresh somewhere new. I listened to those recordings 3 times, trying to find some other explanation. Maybe it was a joke, a prank, a misunderstanding. But there was no mistaking Sophie's voice, her laugh, the casual cruelty of her words. I couldn't sleep. I paced our apartment, looking at the framed photos of us throughout the years. Sophie and me in Paris, at her cousin's wedding, on the beach last summer. In every picture, I had my arm around her, looking at her like she was everything. And in every picture, if I looked closely now, I could see something in her eyes. A distance, a calculation, an absence I'd been too in love to notice. At 5 a.m., I called Lisa. My voice was steadier than I felt. I need your help. And I need you to not ask questions yet. My sister, bless her, didn't hesitate. Her response was immediate and fierce. Tell me what you need. I stood at the altar 6 hours later, wearing the custom tuxedo Sophie had insisted on. The chapel was filled with flowers, candles, and guests, colleagues, college friends, family members, all smiling expectantly. The string quartet played softly in the background. Everything was perfect, exactly as Sophie had planned. I felt strangely calm. The shock had worn off, leaving behind a cold, clear purpose. The music changed. The doors at the back of the chapel opened, and Sophie appeared on her father's arm, radiant in a designer gown that had cost more than my first car. She was smiling, her eyes fixed on me, playing her part flawlessly. I wondered how many times she'd practiced that smile in the mirror. How many times she'd rehearsed every aspect of this performance. As she took her first steps down the aisle, I saw my sister move. Lisa, dressed in the pale blue bridesmaid dress Sophie had chosen, stepped directly into Sophie's path. The music faltered. The guests murmured in confusion. Lisa's voice carried clearly through the chapel, steady and determined. Play it. Now. She dropped a USB drive at my feet, the one I'd prepared during those sleepless early morning hours, using my cybersecurity skills to ensure perfect audio quality and unbreakable encryption. Sophie's smile slipped, confusion replacing her practiced radiance. Her voice trembled with just the right amount of vulnerability. "Marcus, what's going on?" She was good at this. She'd always been good at performing. Without a word, I nodded to the AV technician we'd hired to handle the wedding slideshow. He'd been briefed, paid extra, and sworn to secrecy about the special surprise I had planned. The chapel's speakers crackled to life. Then Sophie's voice filled the sacred space, crystal clear and unmistakable. "He's so obsessed with me, it's pathetic. After the honeymoon, I'm moving in with Ryan anyway. At least he actually gets me." The silence that followed was absolute. Then came the gasps, the whispers, the shocked faces turning to stare at Sophie, who stood frozen in the aisle, her father's hand still on her arm. I watched her face cycle through emotions: shock, confusion, fear, and finally, rage. Her eyes darted around the chapel, looking for an escape, a way to explain this away. But there was none. Her father had gone pale. His voice broke with devastation. "Sophie, what is this?" Sophie tried to recover, her voice rising with desperate denial. It's not what you think, Daddy. I would never." But the recording continued, merciless in its clarity. "After the wedding, we'll go on the honeymoon 2 weeks in Hawaii on Daddy's credit card. I'll get some great social media content, maybe a few more wedding gifts to return for cash." I watched her father's expression harden as he heard his daughter mock his generosity. Watched her mother cover her mouth in horror. Watched her friends exchange glances, already distancing themselves from the scandal. When the recording ended, I didn't shout or cry. I simply took the platinum ring from my pocket, the one that matched the engagement ring she wore, and placed it on the altar. Sophie broke free from her father's grip and rushed toward me, panic replacing her usual composure. "Marcus, please. I can explain," I whispered as she reached for me, her eyes wide with terror. "Enjoy your new life." Then I turned and walked down the aisle, past the stunned guests, through the chapel doors, and into the bright afternoon sunshine. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. I didn't stop at the wedding. That was just the opening move. After walking out of the chapel, I drove to a hotel I'd booked the night before, checked in, ordered room service, and opened my laptop. The pieces were already in motion, I just needed to execute the rest of the plan. First, I accessed the digital evidence I'd been gathering since discovering the recordings. Using my cybersecurity expertise, I'd traced the source of that anonymous email and discovered something interesting. Sophie and Ryan had been careless with their digital communications, using an unsecured messaging app that stored everything in the cloud. I had months of conversations, photos, and even video calls where they discussed their plan in detail. Everything was legally obtained through publicly accessible data breaches and security vulnerabilities, nothing that violated any laws, but everything that exposed their true intentions. Next, I created a comprehensive dossier. Not for revenge, but for protection. Sophie would inevitably try to control the narrative, to paint herself as the victim and me as the controlling partner who had somehow forced her into this situation. I documented everything, the timeline of her deception, the financial planning for their future together using money she intended to take from our divorce, even conversations where they practiced what she would say when she left me. This package went to 3 places: her parents' lawyer, my own attorney, and a journalist friend who specialized in social media investigations. Not to destroy Sophie publicly, but to ensure that the truth would be available if she tried to rewrite history. Then I implemented what I called digital consequences. Using perfectly legal methods, I ensured that anyone searching Sophie's name online would find a very clear picture of what had happened. Not through malicious attacks or illegal hacking, but through strategic search engine optimization and social media management. The wedding guests had already started sharing their own accounts of what they'd witnessed. Within hours, the hashtag #WeddingFail was trending locally, with guests sharing videos and photos from the ceremony. Sophie's carefully curated social media presence, usually filled with sponsored content and lifestyle posts, went completely silent. 2 days later, the plan I'd set in motion began to unfold exactly as I'd predicted. Ryan, faced with the sudden exposure of his business practices, specifically his pattern of targeting wealthy female clients for personal relationships, found his professional life imploding. His gym terminated his employment after several clients came forward with their own stories of inappropriate behavior. His fitness certifications were reviewed when it was discovered he'd been violating professional boundaries. His social media influence, which he'd been building to launch an online fitness brand, collapsed overnight. When Sophie inevitably reached out to him for comfort and support, Ryan panicked. He'd never expected their private affair to become public knowledge, and he certainly hadn't expected the level of scrutiny that followed. Their argument was spectacular, according to witnesses at the coffee shop where they met. Sophie, desperate and feeling betrayed by the man she'd thrown away her life for, demanded that he stand by her and honor their plans. Ryan, realizing that any association with the scandal would further damage his already ruined career, delivered his final blow with cold dismissal. He told her he wanted nothing more to do with her or what he called her psycho games. He blocked her number, deleted her from his social media, and moved to another city within the week. Meanwhile, the package had arrived at her parents' lawyer's office. David Walker was an old-school businessman with an uncompromising sense of honor. The evidence I'd provided, especially the recordings of Sophie mocking her father's generosity while planning to exploit it, cut deeper than any public humiliation. 3 days after what should have been our wedding day, Sophie was summoned to her parents' home. The meeting was brief but decisive. Her father, who had indulged her every whim since childhood, delivered his verdict with devastating finality. He informed her that her access to family funds was immediately suspended. The credit cards he paid for were cancelled. The apartment he subsidized would no longer be covered. The position he'd secured for her at his friend's communications firm was terminated. His voice was cold, businesslike. "You've made your choices. Now you can live with the consequences." Sophie's mother, softer but no less wounded, added a final blow. Her voice shook with hurt and disappointment. "How could you speak about your father that way? After everything we've done for you, everything we've given you?" With her support system in ruins and her backup plan destroyed, Sophie became desperate. She called me repeatedly, left tearful voicemails begging for a conversation. Her voice in the messages was broken, pleading. It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything. We can work through this. I let the calls go to voicemail. Each message was saved, documented, and added to the growing file my lawyer was building. A week later, Sophie began telling a new story to anyone who would listen. I was controlling, she claimed, emotionally manipulative. The recordings were taken out of context or digitally altered, she insisted. She had been trying to escape an unhealthy relationship, and Ryan was just a friend helping her plan her exit. It might have worked if not for the overwhelming digital evidence to the contrary, and the fact that Ryan, trying to salvage his own reputation, had publicly denied her claims, stating clearly on social media that they had indeed been planning a life together after she divorced me. 10 days after the wedding that wasn't, my lawyer filed a defamation lawsuit. The damages sought were substantial, not just financial compensation, but a public retraction of her false statements about me, issued through the same channels she had used to spread them. Sophie's attempt to hire a lawyer of her own was complicated by her new financial situation. With her father refusing to help and her own savings insufficient for the kind of legal representation she needed, she was forced to accept a settlement. The terms were simple: a public apology, acknowledgement of the truth, a modest financial payment, and a legally binding agreement to cease all communication with me and my family. 2 weeks after I should have been on a honeymoon in Hawaii, I watched Sophie deliver a stiff, formal statement to a small gathering of local media. Her face was drawn, her designer clothes replaced by something off the rack, her usual confidence completely shattered. She read from a prepared statement with mechanical precision. The statements I made regarding Marcus Chen were false. Our relationship ended due to my infidelity, not because of any wrongdoing on his part. I apologize for any damage my false allegations may have caused. It wasn't justice exactly, but it was enough. 6 months later, I sat in a quiet cafe downtown, watching rain streak the windows. The coffee was good, the atmosphere peaceful. Across from me sat Jennifer, the paralegal who had helped with my case against Sophie. Jennifer stirred honey into her tea, studying my face. You look better. Less devastated. Less haunted, I hope, I suggested with a slight smile. She grinned at my response. I was going to say haunted, but sure, that works too. We'd been meeting like this weekly initially to discuss the case, then continuing even after it was settled. Jennifer was smart, perceptive, and refreshingly honest, qualities I had once thought Sophie possessed but now recognized as performances rather than genuine traits. Jennifer asked, not out of malice but simple curiosity, heard anything about her lately? I shook my head. Not directly. The agreement works both ways, she stays out of my life, I stay out of hers. But I hear things through mutual acquaintances. I paused, considering whether to share what I'd learned. She's working at a small communications firm in the suburbs. Entry-level position. No connection to her father's network. Apparently, she's living with a roommate, trying to rebuild her savings. And Ryan? Left town. The gym chain transferred him to another state after the scandal died down. From what I understand, they don't speak anymore. Jennifer nodded with satisfaction. Good. They deserved each other, but not in a good way. We talked about other things, a new project at work, a book she'd recommended, plans for the weekend. Normal, everyday topics that had nothing to do with betrayal or revenge. As I walked Jennifer to her car later, she paused before getting in. Her expression was thoughtful, curious. You know what I've been wondering? Who sent you those recordings? You never did find out, did you? I shook my head. Anonymous email, untraceable account. Could have been anyone, hotel staff who overheard them, someone at the gym, even another woman Ryan was seeing. I stopped trying to figure it out. Jennifer smiled with genuine warmth. Well, whoever it was did you a favor. The biggest one of my life, I agreed. That night, as rain tapped against the windows of my apartment, I opened my laptop and began working on a personal project, a new security app I'd been developing in my spare time. The code flowed easily, my mind clear and focused. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, checking if we were still on for dinner tomorrow. I smiled and typed back a confirmation. 6 months ago, I had thought my life was ending. Now I understood it was just the beginning. Sophie had once called me her anchor, meaning it as a compliment wrapped in subtle criticism, stable but dull, reliable but unexciting. She never understood that anchors also keep ships from drifting into dangerous waters. They provide stability when storms threaten to destroy everything. I survived Sophie's betrayal not because I was cold or unfeeling, but because I refused to be defined by someone else's cruelty. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms, without compromising who I was at my core. The revenge I'd taken wasn't born from hatred, it was born from a need for truth, for justice, for the simple principle that actions should have consequences. Sophie had planned to destroy my life for her own gain, and when that plan was exposed, she faced the natural results of her choices. My new apartment was smaller than the condo Sophie and I had shared, but it was mine alone. No designer furniture, no carefully curated decor, just comfortable, functional pieces that suited my actual taste. Books on the shelves I genuinely enjoyed, art on the walls that made me smile. As I worked on my code that evening, I realized something profound. The security systems I designed for companies were based on a simple principle: identify vulnerabilities, protect against threats, and ensure that breaches have consequences. I had simply applied those same principles to my personal life. And for the first time in years, my systems were completely secure. So we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did the wedding day revelation hit harder than you thought? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Marcus's response was justified, or did he go too far? Drop your opinions in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. If this digital justice story kept you hooked, smash that like button. And if you're new here, hit subscribe for more stories where technology meets revenge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.